So, unlike previous presentations, this time we actually have three presenters who are all co authors on a new cookbook that's coming out called Flavors of the Maghreb and Southern Italy, Recipes from the Land of the Setting Sun. The word Maghreb means land where the sun sets, a region that includes Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Mauritania, Libya, and in ancient times, parts of Spain, Sicily, and Malta. The first author of the book, Alba Carbonaro Johnson, invited her longtime friends and CHow members, Paula Jacobson and Sheilah Kaufman, to collaborate on the writing and editing of the new book. So let me just take a moment and tell you a little bit about each of the authors. Alba Johnson, who is joining us while she's traveling in Europe, thank you, Zoom, has been a cooking instructor for over 15 years. Born in Italy and raised in Tunisia, Alba's passion is to share her multicultural cooking experience and the art of simplifying techniques. She conducts culinary tours in Umbria, Tuscany, Italy, and Giverny in France. Paula Jacobson partners with Sheilah Kaufman in the cookbook construction crew. She's been editing cookbooks, developing and testing recipes, proofreading, teaching cooking for over 15 years, and cooking and catering for events for over 30. And Sheilah Kaufman has authored 27 cookbooks and has been a food editor and writer, culinary lecturer, and cooking instructor for more than 45 years. She trained at the late and great L'Académie de Cuisine in Bethesda and teaches Turkish, French, international, and Mediterranean cooking. She also lectures about Jewish culinary traditions and the history of Jews and chocolate. And so with that said, let me please turn this over to Alba, who I think is going to start the presentation.
Okay, well, thank you, Judy, and thank you, Pam. First of all, I just want you to know that I just got back late last night from Rome and Umbria and Tuscany, so might be a little jet lag, but we'll get through this. And I want to thank my partners, Paula and Sheilah, because they did a lot of the hard work editing and testing the recipes. So that's a lot of hard work. So thank you both. And at any time, if you think, you need to chime in, please feel free. So I'm going to do this again with share screen. Okay. Please let me know if it's working.
It is.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I think we just had a little bit of an introduction about this book, which is called Flavors of the Magreb. Basically, it's the North Africa area, which is very different from the rest of Africa. I would say it's more of a Mediterranean type of cooking, but with a lot more spices, and depends on which country that we go to, which I'll show you what we just talked about a minute ago. So currently today, it's Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Mauritania, and Libya. In ancient times, so if you look at those stars, little red dots, those are the other areas that Maghreb used to be. And then eventually it's just North Africa now. But all the countries face Mediterranean. Because of the many different cultures that influenced or invaded, probably is the right word, such as the Phoenicians, Berbers, Romans, Arabs, Ottomans, Turks, Spanish, Bedouins, Italians, and French. There's a lot of mixture of those cultures in the food. And right now, the main language is Arabic. But when I was living there, I was French because I used to go to French schools. So I speak French as well. But the Italian came from the immigration of my grandparents, well, actually great-grandparents. The great-grandparents immigrated from Sicily and Genoa in Italy. So then my grandparents were born in Tunisia, so were my parents. And the story is long how I got to be born in Naples, but I was born in Naples with my younger brother. But we went back to Tunisia because there was very little work during after World War II. And my dad had a better opportunity to go back to Tunisia where everything was building up, not just Tunisia, all the way across Algeria, Morocco. Everything was building up back then. If you were a stonemason, whatever jobs you had, it was sort of like a little United States where there was a lot of work and a lot of immigrants, not just from Italy, but from Spain, different countries, people who come to seek jobs. So that was very prominent. If you couldn't go to the United States, and this would be the place to go. And most likely you probably knew one or two of those languages. So as you know, you probably hear a lot about Morocco, but really Morocco is probably the easy target for people who don't know about Maghreb. But Maghreb is the food is very similar on all of those places that I told you. Algeria has food that's very close to Morocco. Morocco is sort of on a little bit on the sweeter side. Algeria is between the two. Those are the three that I know about. And Tunisia. Tunisia is more of the spicy, very spicy food. And we loved, I grew up with very, very spicy food almost in everything we ate. Instead of ketchup, it was harissa, as you guys probably know. So the main thing is and usually it was Sundays. I remember on Sundays, we would have a lot of food on the table because Sunday was never just your family. It was friends and relatives that would be invited. And so if you have guests, the first thing you think about is, what can I do for my guests to make them feel comfortable and that they want to come back? That they know how much we care that they're here. So that's probably most important thing about Maghreb. I say Maghreb, not so much Morocco because we focus on Morocco so much, but that's one of the things is hospitality. If someone were to knock on your door and you didn't expect them, which could happen very easily. Unfortunately, we didn't have that door that you see there. I wish we did. But if someone knocked on your door, let's just say 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you immediately welcome them in. You'll make some tea. You're going to have maybe take some dried fruit or olives or little cookies. You make sure that they're welcome. If you don't offer that food, they're not going to feel welcome. And that's basically the culture there. Very generous, very food is very colorful as well and fragrant. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So that was one of the main thing I remember growing up there is my God, do we ever stop eating and we ever stop, socializing? But that's what it was. That's what you did. You socialized all the time. And if you were to drop over to someone else's house, the same thing would be that same thing would happen. You unexpectedly knock on a friend's door and they go, oh, please come in. It was not like you had to make an appointment or leave an well, they didn't have emails or text back then, but you were always welcome. And that was a big thing. So traditionally the meals, let me go back one more minute. The meals were always either raw. When I say raw salads, I mean things like fennel. Sometimes carrots were barely boiled and had a spice on it, so you'd have that. So then you had some others cooked out. So everything would be before the meal. All of these plates, there would be lots of little plates, and that was before the meal. And then most likely 100% of the time, it was a couscous dish that was presented, depending on the day of the week, depending on the ingredients that were available. You would have couscous with chicken, or it was Friday, then you would have couscous with fish. Lamb was obviously one of the big ones, or in our Italian culture, my mother would make meatballs and sausages and put that in the tagine and put that over the couscous. So depending on what country you were from, originated from, you'd have different toppings, but there's endless toppings for couscous. And then always a tagine, which is basically got like a stew that would come with some sort of meat and vegetables, always lots and lots of vegetables. So you could also have a tagine with just vegetables. It could be eggplant, stuffed peppers, it goes on and on. And at the end, usually you'd have a mint tea or sometimes coffee. And the dried fruit, well, and nuts were a big ending to a meal. Or once in a while, you'd have the street pastries. We never made the pastries. We would go in the streets and buy the pastries, which always tasted like honey. But now, I know later I found out that it's basically, sugar water. So, but they tasted like honey to me back then. So those are the kinds of things that we had when we had company. These are some of the things, not all, that constitute my cuisine, which is wheat. As you know, the couscous is made of semolina, and it's made either boiled, fried, grilled, and also made pastries with couscous. So there's something called my crude, which is not in the book because it's not easy for people to make, so I didn't put it in there. So there would be a variety of things you could do with couscous or flour. Of course, being Italian, we made pasta. We also made pizza. We didn't have a kitchen like we have today. We cooked outside with 2 burners, or we'd have a little panoon, which is in the book, where you put stuff on top and you grill the meat on it. So that was part of the what we weren't poor. It's just nobody really had ovens. We didn't have ovens, and if we had to make bread, which is part of the wheat thing, I remember my mother would make the bread, then I'd have to walk to the local baker and they'll put a little stamp on it, and then we'd have the baked bread. We'd have to come back and get the baked bread, and lots of the kids like me would walk over and do that. Vegetables, this is kind of like the Mediterranean diet, all of these that you see. Eggplant was big. Bell peppers and tomatoes obviously would make a lot of these vegetables we would stuff, and you stuff it with whatever leftover you had. So if you had a little bit of meat left over, you stuff them, you put a little breading in it, and maybe a little cheese for us. And that's what you did. You just never threw anything away. Legumes, peas, dried beans, lentils, chickpeas were obviously very, very important and always available. Condiments, basically, these are probably very common, these spices that I mentioned here. Probably you've heard of harissa. You've probably seen it in jars or whatever. It's very easy to make. It's in the book. And Ras el Hanout, which means, which is a spice that is sold by usually a vendor. So if you go to a market and you see lots of piles and lots of piles of spices, you say to the vendor, to the person who owns the shop owner, which is what Ras el Hanout means, shop owner. You would say, okay, I have $20. I want $20 worth of Ras el Hanout. And he'd say, here's what you can have for $20. Now, if Paula walked in, she's richer than me, she says $100. And Paula says, I want $100 worth of best spices you can make for me. Well, you might get things like some more exotic, like bird of paradise and what is that? The one that you mix with rice. I can't think of it right this second. Anyway, you would get a more of a top grade of spices. So you could walk in and just buy a little bit of whatever you want and make it your own, or you would just ask him to make you a mix, which was a talent. If you were that merchant, it was a talent to really, he'll say, well, what do you normally make? And you say that, and then boom, 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 he puts it together for you. So things that were preserved basically were olives, capers, tuna, and anchovies. Then dried fruit, we had things like dates, orange, figs, whatever was in season, almonds and pistachios. So if dates, well, dates were always on the tree. Every time I walked around, I could see dates, but we didn't pick them from the tree. We used to buy them, obviously. Um, Almonds were big. Oranges, melons during the summer. So if it wasn't seasonal, we would not see it and we wouldn't be eating it. And then seafood would be basically, we walk to the market every day. I was lucky enough to have a grandfather that wanted to do this. So I walked to the market with him and we pick out fresh fish, mussels, whatever was available. And he taught me how to smell and look at fish to know what's fresh and to bargain, which was another um, very important skill back then. And then, of course, lamb, beef, and chicken were the most prominent. Of course, we had goat, and I hate to say it, but we also had horse meat, but I didn't put that in the book because it wasn't my favorite. So these are some of the contributions of different um, different
cultures.
thank you, cultures. So the Berbers gave us, thank goodness for them, couscous, because I love couscous, one of my favorites, and tagines. And the Phoenicians gave us dry sausage, techniques on how to dry and preserve meats. The Arabs, I'm sure you all know, gave us spices. Ottomans gave us savory and sweet pastries. The Moors, citrus, olives, almond fruit, and herbs. Italy and France I put together because at the time they were pretty close to each other. Lots of vegetable meats and seafood originated in the coastal region. So that I couldn't, well, Spain's in here too, but a lot of the Mediterranean diet are basically those three. The Bedouins gave us dates, milk, cereal, and bread, and the Romans, of course, wheat and grains. So we talked a little bit about it. Sorry, it's very touchy.
Alba, was the spice you were trying to think of saffron?
Yes, thank you, Sheilah. Thank you. So food, most of the time we ate outside because it was warm and you needed a breeze. I was lucky to live near a port, so there was always a breeze. So unless you're having a lot of people over, but most of the time we were outside, we would find pieces of large wood and just keep extending the table and make it a bigger table. And then sometimes people would bring and just share within your neighborhood. You would bring dishes from your country, and we would all share our food, especially on Sundays. I remember that. There was not, I don't want to get political, but I didn't notice as a child the differences between sitting with a Muslim, sitting with a Jewish person, Italian person. There was none of that. When we sat at the table, we were all united and we all brought our dishes to share. And it was always a very pleasant experience and very important because they would describe, like my mother would love to make stuffed artichoke. I don't know how many she would make, but she made a lot. And she would share that with everyone. And others shared their dishes with us. And it was just a wonderful experience. Again, the guests were always honored and we always wanted to make them feel welcome. This is just a proverb, I believe. Oh, I missed it again. Sorry. The food of two is enough for three, and the food of three is enough for four. So now, in other words, make enough food because no matter what, you're going to get a guest. So we talked a little bit about couscous, which is made from durum wheat, and it's so when it's made from scratch, the ladies outside would be 3 or 4 or 5 sitting outside with little bowls, large platters, and they would just work it with their hands with a little bit of warm water. They don't put it all in at the same time. Just keep working it till you make the semolina. And then once it's ready, now today we can buy them in bags. They're pre-cooked, so all we have to do is put them in a bowl, flavor them with a little bit of salt and pepper. And then I don't use broth. I always use water. So then I boil the water, put it in, and just cover it. In some areas, you would see butter instead of olive oil, but it could be done with both. Cover it for about 10 minutes, then uncover it. and, use a tool or your hands to just fluff it up. If you use the olive oil while you're cooking it, it doesn't stick together. And this couscousière, very similar to what my mother had here. She brought it from the old country, but after all the years, it got banged up, so I couldn't really use it anymore. And the tagine, it means two things. One is the actual container, and then the tagine is also container which would made from terracotta. And then one is the actual stew itself. It's a kind of a stew. You could do meats, you can do vegetables, you can mix them both together. And it wasn't something you crank up the heat, okay? You don't crank up the heat. You let it slow cook and let that steam keep coming back into the top of the tagine. It would steam back down. So you always had moisture because it never escaped. It went right back in. And the juices that it creates is incredible. So this is our book, which is finally ready. It took a while for it to be ready because of paper shortage. So basically what's in the book is here in this list. Some of the dishes from my childhood living in Tunisia. Like as I said before, Tunisia is one of the spiciest foods in all of the Maghreb. Normally the chapters are laid out by courses, so we did that. I try to make recipes because I teach a lot of classes, and I try to make my recipes easy for people to cook, because if you make it too hard, then they're not going to cook it. They just want simple things, and they want things that are very fresh, and so I call it minimum effort with maximum flavor. So there was some old-fashioned techniques that we use. A lot of the techniques were our hands. Didn't have a lot of tools, so our hands were mostly used for that. And of course, some new that I try to use now. As the Mediterranean diet, very close, quality ingredients. And back then it was all local. Now, if I make it here, I'm lucky enough to maybe find, zucchini where I couldn't find zucchini there in the winter. And of course, my two partners, Sheilah and Paula, did all the testing for each dish, so we know that they work. I have included some information on extra virgin olive oil. I do actually tours in the Umbria area twice a year, and about extra virgin olive oil if you have questions. And of course, a little page or two about why it's better to eat produce in the season. Some pantry essentials for the Maghreb cuisine. We put a herb and spice chart, and it won't be every herb and spice, but the majority of what we use. And for the customers, mostly I got this feedback from my clients, my students, helpful tips and basic cooking methods. Sometimes they wonder, yeah, can you tell me a little bit more about it? So we try to put that in there. And then that our book is now available through Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And so now we're going into the chapters. I'm probably not going to go through every single one of these, but so we have cold appetizer, which I was telling you earlier. You have cold appetizers and you have hot appetizers. So some of these are a mixture of the Maghreb and some of my Italian background, but a lot of them are Maghreb because that's where I learned them. That's where we ate them. So then we have soups. A lot of these are Maghreb and some are South Italian. Then sauces. This was a big one. My customers really wanted a lot of information about sauces. They don't want to have to make the same sauces. And some of these you're probably not going to get in a restaurant. That's what's nice about it. So, and pesto in Italian means to grind. It doesn't mean the actual, sauce that you make. It's not a sauce. Pesto means to grind. So it can have different ingredients. And you can actually get more creative if you wanted to do a mixture of these. And as I said, the pastas, there's probably some pastas here that you may never have seen before. You won't find in a restaurant. One really that stands out for me is the pasta with linguine milanese, which is made with fresh dill and tomato sauce and garlic. And you can throw in a little anchovy if you like. I use the paste because I'm not crazy about it. But so this is one of the dishes of my mom and my grandmother. It was handed down. So you make the sauce with the dill. You boil the dill, make it in a pasta sauce. And then when you're finished, you mix or top the pasta with it. And instead of cheese, we would put a little bit of olive oil and breadcrumbs in a pan and toast it warm. So when you put it on the pasta, you hear a nice sizzle. You actually hear the sizzle, and I've done it a lot on my cooking classes, and they just love it. So there's a whole list here. I'm not going to go through all of it. Couscous, couscous is endless, like pastas. You know, there could be 100 ways to make couscous. So the one I'm going to mention the most is couscous for festive occasions. So that one is cold. The other ones are hot. They're served with a hot topping, a hot meats or except for the couscous salad. But so the couscous for festive occasion was used when you had an occasion to go to. It could be a wedding, childbirth, baptism, you know, lots of things. So for that, and I see Sheilah cry, smiling because we made this in one of our cooking classes online. So that one is made with, instead of olive oil, butter, but you could use olive oil and flavor it with, I always put salt and pepper in my couscous when I steam it. And then the toppings are things like dried fruits, almonds, a little bit of brown sugar and cinnamon mix. So I normally serve it on the side because some people may just want it to top with it. So this type of festive couscous was brought, you know, for instance, one family would make one, another family. So if there was a wedding, you can make it enough for like 200 people. Everybody would bring in. So there's lots of plates of this festive couscous. Of course, that wasn't the only thing to serve, but that is one that is if you see the recipe, if you ever get the book, you'll see that you'll absolutely love it. So that was one of the couscous. Then we have the chicken section. You can see different kinds of ingredients we use for that. Then we have a beef, lamb, and pork. I'd say out of all the ones that I made here, I would say that my clients or customers love this meatball. Excuse me, meatball. It's not going well. The meatball and egg tagine, believe it or not, is one of their favorites because you make the meatballs in a tagine, a little bit of spice with tomatoes and everything. And then at the end, you throw in some eggs and cover it. And so you have a full meal with the sauce and the meatballs and the eggs. It's a wonderful, wonderful dish. And it can be made with sausage as well. And then, of course, we included some fish and seafood recipes. And salad dressings, we have quite a bit of them. I combine balsamic and harissa because, believe it or not, they taste really well together. And maybe some of you already had some sort of hummus dressing, but it's in there also. And then the different kinds of salad. There's no mayonnaise in this book, I can tell you that. So then we have vegetables and sides. And these are a mixture of both cultures. The pizza dough, very popular. I just came back from Italy and I was in Naples for a day. So we had like the fried pizza dough and we made that and we just put a little bit of sugar on it, I believe. And when we tested it, it came out really, really well. And then the bottom here, you see this, this is a Sicilian pizza, which is a little bit different. It's thicker, but there's no cheese on it. So it's basically olives, onions, tomatoes, capers, and for those who like anchovies, then anchovies. So then we're off to the eggs and frittata. One famous one is the Easter pie, which is delicious pie with the eggs in it. Some of them you might have heard, maybe some you haven't. And then leftovers. Whenever we had pasta, we always made, excuse me, a frittata with pasta. So there was never anything left over. First of all, there was a tiny refrigerator, and I think in my early childhood we had no refrigerator. So we had to always go out and buy everything for the day. So, and if you had leftover tomatoes and zucchini, whatever, you made a frittata out of it. So nothing was ever thrown away. And so here we have some of the desserts. And I think this is where our pizza, yeah, the fried pizza dough is right here in this section. And some other easy things to make. And you can see the tart. The tart is one of the easiest thing to make and is very popular wherever you go, especially in Italy. There'll be all kinds, different kinds of toppings with marmalade, basically. Yeah. So, condiments, obviously we have quite a few. We have a list of those in our book. And the Ras El Hanout, I usually make myself. Well, now I can't go to Morocco, Tunisia, but I mean, I like to make it myself because then I can play around with what I want. I want my taste buds to tell me, you know, what I want it to taste like, so I know what to do. I don't make big mounds of it. I make it just enough for that particular dish.
Alba,
Yes.
I think one of the most interesting additions to the Ras El Hanout is rose petals.
Yes, rose petals. And those can be found. You can find them in Turkish stores.
Middle Eastern market.
Middle Eastern, yes. So, and that again, you know, used moderately because you have to like rose petals. I also use it in tea. So, that would be one of the probably more costly ones that Paula, since she's richer than me, she got at the market. So yes, there's a lot of, they would be exotic here, but they wouldn't be exotic there.
Kenzies has
Pardon? Sheilah, you muted.
Kenzies has a lot of things that we use, and
Is that in Rockville? Rockville?
it's
Okay,
everywhere.
yes.
You can go online, and Balducci's has some unusual things too.
Yes, I think everything that we have in their book is all easy to find things. We didn't want it to have, you know, spices that would be hard to make. You know, when I travel, I always find the Ras El Hanout, or my family sends it, but I love making it myself because this is how you discover your palate, just by tasting things. Just try them, and then you'll find the right thing for the food that you're making. I'm not going to have the same mix that I would for a fish that I would for a chicken. But once you try a little bit at a time, you'll see that you know, your taste buds will tell you what you want. So I believe this is our last slide, and this is just a quote that I put together. Food is a rich source of history and culture. It gives us a deeper insight into the place where a particular type of food originated. The person caringly cooked it for us. So I don't think it's just from Maghreb. I think a lot of cultures, as the Maghreb culture, want to give us that day, or you want to give that the people that you invite, you know, show them how you care about them through the conversation and food. So that is, I think, universal, not just for us. Okay, that is our presentation. Paula and Sheilah, did you want to add anything?
There's some things in the chat room, and
Okay, but do you want to add anything from your perspective?
no, but you were telling me that in a lot of places in the Maghreb there were large Jewish communities, and I think
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
fascinating. And I guess
Absolutely. There was actually a movie made not too long ago where they show that in the movie, how our communities would get together and actually share the different foods. So what I was saying as a child and a young teen was actually true. And the movie showed that, which was exciting for me because it really made me think, wow, I was there. I was part of that culture.
Do you know the name of the movie?
No, but I will, I don't remember it this second, but I will remember it and send it out if I can.
Yeah, I'd like to know.
Paula, do you have anything?
No, I can tell you the food is fabulous. All of Alba's recipes are easy to make and really tasty. I've made many of them over and over again. But there is a question to Sheilah and me. Was it challenging to find ingredients to test the recipes? Are there good shops to buy Magreb spices and ingredients? No, we did not have any problem finding any of the ingredients, especially because there are so many Middle Eastern markets. Yekta has probably everything you need. I don't know too many of the other markets. And Penzies has most of the spices.
It looks like we have another question from Elisabetta. What type of fish was the most popular in Magreb? So, it depends on your pocket, but, mussels were big. Sea urchins. These are all things I didn't like as a child. I don't know how to say it in English, languilla. Looks like a snake, languilla. Do you know how to say it, Elisabetta?
An eel?
Yes, thank you, Elisa. Okay. That was not fun. As far as other fish, there was a lot of small fish like smelts, smelts or smelts.
Yeah.
And those my grandfather would fry them up real quick and you ate everything, tail, head, everything. Flounder, I'm trying to remember, cod.
Cod in the book. But,
Cod, yeah.
But not salted dried cod. Fresh cod.
There was, but I didn't like it. So my mother would make that once in a while, but I was sent to bed early that night because I wouldn't eat it. It was way too salty for me. So would the food in a Jewish household be different from food that we have been cooked in Muslim Christian? So I would say different from the food that would have been.
Well, Alba, can I address that first?
Yes, go ahead. Sure.
My kitchen at home is kosher, and I didn't have a problem with some of the recipes I didn't make. I made with somebody else at her house, but except for the obvious pork and shrimp, there weren't too many things that we couldn't make or substitute. And Alba, wasn't there a Friday night? Wasn't there a special? I'm trying to remember which recipe it was.
There was a Friday night couscous, like made with fish.
Yeah, but I thought there was one that you referred to that the Jews made for Shabbat.
They celebrated, and correct me if I'm wrong, but at Christmas they made the Feast of the Seven Fishes. Didn't you do that?
Well, our family did because we had the Italian ancestors, but not everyone would. If you weren't Italian, you probably made something else. But there was always a mix of dishes, so it wasn't always boom. If you made pasta, you could very well have made a couple other dishes from Magreb. So there was always a mixture. You could always see that, it wasn't just the Italian house. We all mix the ingredients together. Any other questions from? I don't see any in the chat. I mean, I'm happy to, if you want to open your mics, I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
I noticed on the lists of the foods, you didn't have my favorite, which was the eggplant timbales. It wasn't listed in any of the lists.
Oh, well, I don't know. I made the ingredient based on the last update, but here's the book. If anybody wants to see, this is now finally it came to us. This is the Food of Magreb. We did all our pictures. and styling, and it is now available in Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. And if we could always send, maybe Paula, we can send the links that we just got from our publisher.
Okay.
There was a question about the Ottomans, and I could address that question.
Sure, go ahead.
Since I did those 2 Turkish books with the ambassador to Turkey's wife. And from the 1400s on, the Ottomans conquered most of Asia, Africa, and Europe. And wherever they conquered, you never had to change your religion or learn their language. And the Sultan would want any ingredients or food recipes brought back to Topkapi Palace, where they would then make them. And eventually they became part of the markets when things began to be not so special. And the Ottomans, besides pastries and desserts, they were the first ones to have tomatoes, which they got from the Spanish conquistadors who came back to Spain. And they had coffee from the Arabs, and many, many, many foods that we don't know where they came from were brought back to Topkapi from the 1400s on. They considered themselves masters of gourmet, and they feasted like kings, everybody.
I think you have another question, Sheilah, by Elisabetta.
What is the question?
In the chat. You want me to read it?
Yes, please.
It says, by the way, I found out that the Normans in Sicily, especially under Frederick II, cooked for Jewish guests. Frederick had Jewish and Muslim cooks. The first Sicilian recipe collection by Frederick's cook had recipes which reflected Jewish taste.
Oh, wow. That's
Yes.
interesting.
You should check out the cookbook of Frederick II.
What,
It's
I want to write
amazing.
it down. What is it? Wait a minute.
I'll get it for you. I'll make a note.
The cookbook of Frederick II?
Well, I don't know if they call it the cookbook. It's a collection of recipes which were actually written in Sicilian Italian, okay? And it's considered the first Italian cookbook after Platina, because before they used to write in Latin.
I think did we answer this question? What was the Ottoman influence on the Maghreb? I think Sheilah answered that, right?
Well, I was wondering, that actually came from me.
Okay.
She talked about what the Ottomans took from all over, and I was wondering if it ever came back. For instance, it was mentioned stuffed vegetables, and I think of that as very Ottoman, and it was discussed it was mentioned in the Maghreb that they stuffed vegetables, and that there were some pastries and things from the Ottomans. So I kind of wanted to follow up, not what went to Istanbul, but if there are things that came the other way. I know the people were given a lot of independence, but I thought there might be some changes, from their rule.
The Ottomans worshipped vegetables, and the eggplant was the queen of vegetables. And if you were a famous cook, then you had at least 50 recipes for eggplant. And I can't imagine 50 recipes for eggplant. But that's what there was. And if you were considered a chef in good standing, then you had those 50 recipes. And the Ottomans made a lot of soups, simple soups, and they stuffed anything that they could stuff. So not only eggplants, but bell peppers and dates and phyllo dough and things like that, and grape leaves.
And as we said before, remember all those cultures we talked about was all influenced by those cultures in the Maghreb. So, you know, and the Berbers had a lot to do with it, but, you know, those were all the influences. It didn't come from one nation, it came from lots of different cultures. And that's what's nice about it. You know, so Mediterranean food is absolutely, in my opinion, the healthiest foods that you can eat because we have raw material. We don't process things. Maghreb is exactly the same, except we have more of a culture, traditional cultures. We have a little more spices.
Well, they eat in season, which
exactly
we do not. We will
right.
have blueberries come from Mexico and be transported all that way in January or February. They eat in season in a lot of parts of the world, and that is the way to go. That's why farmers markets are becoming so popular.
Well, yeah, and I mean also when you go to a farmer's market or you go to a farm, and has anybody ever gone to a farm and you pull a carrot out of the ground and you taste it, and then you go in the grocery store and taste it? It's nothing. It tastes like nothing. Same thing with tomatoes. And I find that obviously the aroma also, you could pick up an apple at the grocery store and try and smell it. Nothing happens.
Well,
Nothing
these
happens.
things are gassed and kept in cold storage.
They're kept in cold storage for a long time, but we do it because I think part of it is we have a large country and we can't get to everything, to everyone. If you're lucky to live in a small country, you have no choice. You got to go and buy what's local. It's a little bit, I think, you know, thinking back now, I think that it's a little bit harder for the United States because we're such a large country. So when we go to farmers market, we're excited because we know it's going to be fresh, it's going to be local, and we look forward. You know, I might just pick up a few things that I'll figure out the recipe when I get home. And that's what's exciting about it. You'll figure it out, just like those 50 eggplants. I think I can write that book, Sheilah, because I love eggplant, and maybe that's our next book.
Randy Clark, one of our CHow members who can't be in attendance, he sent an email and he had a question that he wanted asked. He wanted
Yes.
to know, do Tunisians really prefer their pasta overcooked, and he had it in quotes, relative to Sicilians? And he referenced a website, tasteCooking.com/Tunisia/pasta/obsession.
There was somebody sent out, I think it was Sheila Cry, but I could be mistaken, sent out that question, and the answer was that Tunisians overcook their pasta. They like it like that. She sent that out right before the chat.
Yes, I got his email.
Okay.
I'm going to say in my family, no, because anything overcooked was to the side. Now, my grandmother, yes, my grandmother cooked it, not overcooked it, but cooked it just over the edge of al dente. Can't be al dente, but just al dentino, which means a baby tooth maybe instead of a big tooth. So she did cook it a little bit more. She cooked her vegetables more than my mother and I cooked. So it was just, I think it depends on who did it, but I would never eat overcooked pasta. I mean, at least I don't remember that. So I don't know where that information came from, but I can tell you that I would say maybe sometimes, but not always.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. This was fascinating.
It's good.
Well, thank you for having us. Thank you for having us.